What motivates a multipotentialite? Which engine do you run on? Let's find out today. Welcome to Multi-Loving Model, the channel that shows you how to handle multiple interests, multiple relationships, and multiple approaches to finance. My name is Gerald, and I help people to figure out their way through life, love, and learning in order to customize their own path to happiness. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome, and I hope this is going to be great for you. If not, if you've been on this channel for some time, thank you so much for coming back, and I hope that you will find value in this video. And today on Multi-Mission Monday, we are going to be talking about what kind of engine drives you as a person. So in this video, we are going to be covering two particular videos that we've covered before. The first one is the previous one, which is how do you tell if you're a multipotentialite? And the other one is looking into the three types of brains. And I'll link them over there, or there, whichever place, right? So, yeah. So basically for this video, we're going to be talking about two different contents that the previous videos have addressed. The first one is what kind of a multipotentialite are you? And the other one is the three types of brains that our brain operates under, and you'll find it in the show notes. I don't know where it is. So first, let's cover really quickly, right? So we have different kinds of multipotentialites as well as specialists. So first and foremost, we have the specialists, which focuses on one thing and mainly focus on the one thing until they've finished their whatever thing and they've served it to completion. Generally speaking, specialists will stay on one, maybe two things for the entire life, and they will become absolute masters at it. So that's the specialist. The second kind is the mastery multipotentialite. So the mastery multipotentialite is similar to the specialist in the sense that they want to achieve mastery for their particular subject. Once they achieve that mastery, however, they do not continue it on as per the specialist, right? So the specialist masters something and continues to master it, continues to hone that skill, continues to make it even sharper. The mastery multipotentialite, on the other hand, achieves that mastery, stops there, and then moves on to a different kind of thing to master. So mastery multipotentialite will learn several things in a lifetime. They'll become masters of a few things. So next up is the interest multipotentialite. Now the interest multipotentialite has a number of fixed interests where they kind of rotate around, and then they have maybe a few side projects. But generally speaking, they have certain interests that they have, and they keep maintaining that, and they can potentially become masters at those over time. But generally speaking, they take a longer time than the mastery multipotentialite, because the mastery multipotentialite focuses on just that one thing at a time. The interest multipotentialite will focus on multiple things at a time. So they may achieve mastery, it may take some time. And finally, we have the discovery multipotentialite, wherein they do not necessarily have fixed interests, or if they do, it is a marginal kind of interest where they just keep coming back to just a few things, but they don't stay long on that. They are not interested in mastery per se. So they will be very happy to just explore a wide range of topics and subjects, anything that just interests them, and they will explore that. So these are the kinds of people who are most unlikely to become masters of their craft at any one time, but they become the real kinds of generalists where they kind of pick up skills in everything. And so they become the glue that binds a party together. So next we're going to be talking about the other brain chemicals. So in my other video, I talked about the four kinds of main neurochemicals, if you will, in your body, the kinds of chemicals that make you feel really happy. And they are dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. Now, each of these have certain roles. So let's start with dopamine. Dopamine is the exploration drug. It is the thing that allows you to feel excited when you achieve something. So when you expect something, when you expect a really good result, if you expect a reward, your dopamine starts to spike. And then when you get it, you get the intense rush of dopamine in the end. If you do not achieve it, however, your dopamine drops down, and that prompts your body to not repeat that behavior. So dopamine is involved in whether or not you repeat an action. So that is your expectation and excitement neurochemical. Next is serotonin. So serotonin is about status. It is about power. It's about being comfortable where you are. So serotonin is basically achieved when you gain respect, when you gain a certain standing in your society. So those in higher positions of power tend to have more serotonin than those in lower positions of power. In the same way that the alpha lobster has more serotonin than those lobsters which are not alphas. Our next neurochemical is oxytocin. Oxytocin is like the binding agent that glues two people together. Not literally, but figuratively, chemically, in that sense. So oxytocin is produced when, for example, a mother breastfeeds their baby. It bonds them together so that the mother has an incentive, has certain wants to take care of the child. And for example, if you have, let's say, postcoital interaction, what's going to happen is that the male and the female are going to bond over that kind of oxytocin. Well, for the male, it's actually vasopressin, but that's besides the point. The oxytocin binds the two people together and make them want to, stay together, basically. So that's oxytocin. It enables you to bond and to really go in depth with something, whatever it is. And the last one is endorphins. So endorphins occur when you've done exercise or you get a pain and whatsoever. It's basically the painkillers of the body. And what these painkillers do to you is that they allow you to feel a general sense of contentment. If, let's say, you're in pain, if you're in distress and whatsoever, if you have high levels of endorphins, what those endorphins are going to do is they're going to suppress that pain response down so that you do not feel as uncomfortable. So what happens is that if you have a lot of endorphins, you are generally able to absorb a lot more impact. You're able to absorb a lot more trauma in that sense. So that's the general idea for endorphins. So now that we've run through a little bit of the types of multipotentialites / specialists and the neurochemicals in your brain, the four happy chemicals, if you will, what have they got to do with each other? Now, understand, I am not a therapist. I am not a certified coach of any kind of counselor. I've not been trained in any of these psychological stuff. So all in all, I'm really just a quack, right? And I'm just going to be telling you my personal opinion on what could potentially be a possible link to give you a better sense of what your body has to deal with. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be linking all the different kinds of multipotentialites and these four neurochemicals. And understand, every single person has all the chemicals, and fundamentally we are all interested, we are all curious people. It's just to what degree that we are curious in. And that being said, let's go into what these things are. How do these types of multipotentialites and these four neurochemicals come together? So first and foremost, let's talk about the mastery multipotentialite. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. Let's talk about the specialist first. Now, the specialist wants to hone in on one thing and then become the absolute best in their field. Right? So which one does it most correlate to? It actually most correlates to serotonin. So serotonin drives you to become kind of the leader of the pack. It drives you to want that respect, that recognition, that level of status. So by being the absolute best, we can arguably say that a specialist is driven by serotonin. I mean, all disclaimer again, it's not necessarily true. It's just one way of representing this idea, right? It's just a model, and as with all models, it's probably wrong because I have no basis and I have no evidence. But anyway, coming back to it. So a specialist is probably driven by serotonin, which means for a specialist, the reason why they do not branch off into other fields is because by going into other fields, they feel that they are inferior. They feel that they don't have the status, that they are not really respected and things like that. So for a specialist, they will focus on their field and they'll become the absolute best so that they can garner that kind of respect and recognition that serotonin buzz is going to drive them to get towards. So next is the mastery multipotentialites. The mastery multipotentialite is different from the specialist in that the specialist is desiring of the status, the power of being the absolute best. Whereas the mastery multipotentialite is not that interested in that fundamentally, right? So what is it that drives the mastery multipotentialite? Well, my suspicion is this. Of the three remaining ones, endorphin is probably the one that will symbolize the mastery multipotentialite best. Why is that so? Well, here's why. When a mastery multipotentialite goes through the process of mastery, it is a painful process. It is fundamentally painful, right? To get from a beginner past to the stage of sucking to a stage where you're okay, and then going through the whole process of becoming an expert takes a whole lot of process, a whole lot of time, a whole lot of commitment, and a whole lot of pain. So if that pain was to be dialed down, it becomes easier to achieve that mastery. So that is the first indication that a mastery multipotentialite is probably driven more by the endorphins. The second reason why the mastery multipotentialite might be driven by endorphins is because of what happens after attaining mastery. Endorphins mask pain. They suppress pain, but they don't necessarily give you the enjoyment, right? They don't necessarily give you the drive to go out and do things, as serotonin does, as perhaps dopamine as well. Instead, what happens is that it sucks less to become a master, and once you become a master, there's nothing driving you anymore, right? There's no pain to be had. As a master, everything's smooth, everything's easy and whatsoever. And so if you don't have any challenge, you don't really need endorphins. And so your endorphins levels start to go down. And if that's the case, perhaps that explains why the mastery multipotentialite then moves on to a different thing in order to maintain that endorphin buzz. Right? Are you getting me? So the mastery multipotentialite is probably motivated through the endorphins. Now I'm going to skip the interest multipotentialite and move straight to the discovery multipotentialite, because this one I think is pretty obvious. The discovery multipotentialite loves to learn new things. It's constantly looking for new interest after new interest, and once it learns something, it just moves on to another one, right? So it's constantly learning something new at all times. Of all four neurochemicals, there's only one that really responds to that, and that's dopamine. The reason why you go to casinos and you can get hooked into staying at the casino for a very long time is because they have learned how to really utilize your dopamine system to keep you wanting to do more. Gambling triggers the dopamine response. Investing can also trigger the dopamine response, but it's fundamentally about the rewards that you could potentially get. For the discovery multipotentialite, because they're constantly looking out for the discovery, they're looking out for the thrill of that which is new. Generally speaking, these are dopamine hunters, right? They're always chasing the dopamine that comes from learning something new, to be excited, to be wow, you know, that kind of thing. So that is for the discovery multipotentialite. They are very clearly driven by dopamine. And lastly is the interest multipotentialite. Now this one took me a little bit of time because, you know, I'm an interest multipotentialite, and it's I hadn't thought of this myself. It's only while preparing for this video that I kind of looked at it and it's like, you know what? These neurochemicals actually line up pretty well. Now, we've already used up serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins. So the last one is oxytocin. How would you pair up interest multipotentialites with oxytocin? So first and foremost, interest-based multipotentialites, they have several interests which they always seem to gather around, and then perhaps some side interests, but they always come back to the same few. While they are interested to eventually become master of all of them, they don't necessarily feel that pressure, that urge to really drive themselves to become a master. Instead, they are happy and content to just make sure that to kind of like divide the time between all of them, to make sure that every single one of them is attended to. And if you think about it, if you look at how a mother and her children work, a mother doesn't focus on just one child. I mean, I'm assuming in a healthy relationship in that case, a mother is not only going to focus all her resources on one child to make that child the absolute best and then move on to another child. No, she's going to give all of them care and attention. Now, of course, because we're human, she may bias one particular child over the others, but she's still going to give each and every single one of them sufficient love, attention, care, nurturing, whatsoever, in order to grow all of them up simultaneously. So if you look back at the interest multipotentialite, they're growing multiple interests at once, and it's always the same few. It's not like you are a mother and you just take in a new adopted child and then you throw him out at the end of the day. No, that's not how mothers really do it. I mean, I'm assuming most normal healthy mothers don't do that, but that would be more the approach of the discovery multipotentialite. The interest multipotentialite, on the other hand, they would take one child or two children, multiple children, let's say 5 children, If they have 5 children, they will grow all 5 children. And occasionally they might help out the neighbor's child and whatsoever, but their focus ultimately is on their children, and they're going to grow all of them up at the same time. And that is why I think that the interest multipotentialite is probably driven by oxytocin. So there we have it. We have the 4 different categories of multipotentialites and what they are possibly driven by. The specialist is driven by serotonin. The mastery multipotentialite is driven by endorphins. The interest multipotentialite is driven by oxytocin. And the discovery multipotentialite is driven by dopamine. So what do you think? This is just a theory that I just came up with, right? It's just looking at all the things and it's like just trying to fit bits and pieces together. It's not scientific. Let me just make this clear. It is not scientific. I cannot be used as a quotation for any of this really high-flying things because I've done absolutely 0 experiments on this. However, what this video is, it's an interesting way to view the world. It's a different perspective. And that is ultimately the goal of this channel. It is to broaden your mind at the end of the day. So what do you think of this theory? Do you think this makes sense? That we can actually pair the kinds of multipotentialite levels to the neurochemical drivers. Do you think this actually works? Let me know down in the comment sections below. If you've liked this video, please give me a like. It helps out the channel. You know, we need plenty of help on this particular regard. If you think this video might interest somebody who is interested in this sort of things, you know, consider sharing it. You know, it's going to be very much appreciated. Thank you very much. If you like more content about how to maintain and handle multiple interest relationships and approaches to finance, consider subscribing to the channel and pressing the notification button at it, because right now the upload schedule is going to be a little wonky. My name is Gerald and this is Multi-Loving Model. Be happy in diversity. Cheers.